Chris Shields put up a post about Michael Jordan that I thought that was very important. I said I was gonna bring it up. I totally forgot. I ain't put in the notes. If you, I really invite you to go to the Some Dude Pod group to look at the post. I'm not gonna read it all in full. Basically, it talks about the narrative about Michael Jordan being the greatest in the narrative. And yes, let me break it down like this, right? And this is why I don't debate with niggas no more about shit. I'll ask you questions, see where you going. The debate will never be about what you want it to be about. I'm going to control the narrative. Here's why. Mike, in the 70s, the NBA, while I had Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain somewhat, the Boston Celtics still was winning championships. Some other people, the Lakers too. This was probably the last time it was parity in the NBA though. But the NBA was also known as a drug league. It was a lot of fighting. Kermit Washington damn near killed Rudy Tomjanovich. And people didn't like to see niggas all on their screen playing basketball. The games were on tape delay, so they wasn't live. They was on tape delay. And there were concerns that the league will go out of business.
Yep.
In 1979, you have Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in college, right? And they pretty much saved the NBA when they got there. Larry Bird was drafted by the Celtics a year earlier, and they just kept his rights. Magic Johnson gets drafted by the Lakers, who wins a coin flip against the Chicago Bulls. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
But even still, when they got there, the NBA was on tape delay. That changed, I think, in 1985.
Yeah.
All right. David Stern becomes the commissioner in the NBA. He sees potential in marketing the league better and marketing their stars. So Michael Jordan comes in. You already got Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. So he's marketing them. He's putting them in the forefront. Michael starts to come in. He becomes a big star. Maybe like he's the best rookie in '84, but he really begins becoming a star, in when he dropped 63 on
Boston.
Still got the drug shit because 1986 is known as the drug draft. Rest in peace to Len Bias. But now Michael Jordan is starting to come into his own. So what I'm saying is when it comes to narrative, blame the NBA for the narrative. Blame the NBA. Don't blame anybody else but them because the NBA propped up Michael Jordan to be what he is. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say, you saying the narrative that we've created around Michael Jordan is that he's pretty much like untouchable.
Yeah, and no, that's the narrative. We didn't create that narrative. That's the narrative that the NBA and the press through the NBA has created.
Yep.
Now, this is one of the reasons why I was never the biggest Michael Jordan fan. I was never really the biggest Michael Jordan fan because I will always say, what about Charles Barkley? What about Patrick Ewing? What about Gary Payton? What about Sean Kemp? What about Karl Malone? What about John Stockton? What about? He's like, Michael Jordan. He's the greatest. But that's the same narrative that every other star has gotten
Absolutely.
since Michael Jordan. So that's why I understand what people talk about. But if you take away for that, you got to take away for them Allen Iverson narrative. Because the narrative of Allen Iverson is that he took that team that went to the finals by himself. Yet that team had the coach of the year, the sixth man of the year, the defensive player of the year. If you have all of that on your team, you should go to the finals in your conference. But the narrative is that Allen Iverson took that team by himself. So do we take away the Allen Iverson narrative? What about Kobe Bryant and Shaq? Do we take away their narratives? Do we take away LeBron's narrative? Do we? Every player has a narrative.
And the narrative around Mike is that just Mike was untouchable. The narrative is that Mike shattered dreams. He stopped people from going.
He did.
Which he did. But a lot of people, like, it's just always, when it comes to shit, everybody, like, I mean, we've already discussed this shit already, Bang. Like, everybody brings up the narrative in the 80s. That what did Mike do in the 80s?
So pause.
Mike got dropped in the first round.
So pause right there. Narrative. Now the new narrative is Michael Jordan got lost in the first round.
That's the new narrative.
And like I had told Shields in the joint, Nick, this is why I'm not debating with niggas. I'm just gonna use my pod as my shit, and if you don't agree, I don't give a fuck. But I'm not gonna debate with you because I can't debate with you if you don't know how dope those Milwaukee Bucks teams was. There's a reason why Don Nelson was the all-time leading coach in wins.
Winning this coach. Yep.
Reason for that. Second, when you say they was dropped in the first round, one of those years he went against the Boston Celtics, that team was at the time the greatest team ever fucking assembled. Was Michael Jordan supposed to beat them with Dave Corzine? And nobody said that Michael Jordan was the greatest player ever in 1994, 1985, 1986, 1987. That narrative only started when he came back. You really start hearing people say greatest of all time. They wasn't saying that in 1991, 1992, 1993. They were saying that he was the best player in the league. The questions of best player ever started in 1996 when he's back and they win the title. That was it. Because you never saw where somebody won 3 straight, played basketball, and then come back to win a motherfucking title. Like he never left. And then shit really started to hit the fan when they won in 1997. And then 1998 is not he didn't have a going away shit like Kobe Bryant and Paul Pierce and Dwayne Wade. The motherfuckers, they didn't do that shit till he was with the Wizards.
We didn't, because we actually honestly didn't know if Mike was gonna retire after they beat the Jazz for the 3-peat.
Right, niggas just said, is that the last shot?
Like, we really didn't know. We really didn't know what was gonna go on with that organization. So whatever it is that happened, as far as like with the offseason and shit like that, that's when we finally knew, like, yeah, all right, Mike retiring. Because Mike didn't say he was retiring after.
So again, niggas was like the greatest player ever in 1992, So right. That narrative is a narrative that people are throwing around. That now there's narratives, and then that's just niggas just talking the talk. And so if anybody say that niggas was saying that Michael Jordan was the best player ever when he won his first title, no. The narrative was throughout the whole Detroit shit was the same with LeBron James. He's getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. He's getting to these spots, but can he win the big one? In 1991, that was the narrative. Michael Jordan is the greatest player in the NBA, probably the greatest talent in the NBA right now, but can he win the big one? He always went up against Detroit and lost. Nobody was saying Michael Jordan was the greatest player ever then. So you can't hold him to that standard of that narrative that you are trying to create because you want LeBron James to be the best player of all time.
Or Kobe Bryant.
Nobody said that at that time. Niggas in 1988, this nigga Mike won MVP, Defensive Player of the Year in the same year. They say he was the best. They still didn't say that he was really the best. The nigga averaged 37.1 and didn't win MVP. Because they said that he was still not the best player ever. But in 1990, he was not the best player in the NBA. That was still Magic Johnson. He took the fucking mantle away from Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson said during that what's that Monte Carlo game, wherever they played that shit at during the Dream Team shit. That's when Michael Jordan. That's when they gave the reins to Michael Jordan. So where's the narrative that Michael Jordan was the greatest player ever? The narrative that Jordan did keep people from winning titles. He was the best player in the fucking league. So yes, he was the best player on the team. Without Tim, they're not even nowhere. They're not nowhere near it. So yes, Michael, and the league was being promoted as stars. So yes, they marketed as Michael Jordan kept Patrick Ewing, kept Charles Barkley, kept Karl Malone and John Stockton and Gary Payton. Yes, because the league marketed stars. One star. So yes, that's how the league marketed it. And shouts out to, I think it was First Take that asked the question, whose legacy was affected the most by Michael Jordan? And to me, it is no doubt in my mind that it was Patrick Ewing. I think Patrick Ewing would have won a title in New York if it was one, at least if it wasn't for Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But that is the reason why this narrative is because of the NBA. But that's because of the NBA and how it was promoted. If that narrative is not here, the NBA is not here. To be frank, if they don't switch the way they was doing their thinking then and not promoting their stars, promoting teams instead of stars, then you don't get first players by their first name. Magic, Bird, well, just one name players: Magic, Bird, Michael, MJ, Kobe, Ewing. You don't get none of that shit. They bankrupt. So that narrative helped save the NBA. But if we gonna go, let's go deep.